Good morning, everyone. I'm Don Lemon. Thank you so much for joining me. Carol is off today. We appreciate you joining us here in the CNN Newsroom. The morning crisis in Iraq deepens and the sense of urgency is growing. Witnesses are telling CNN that terrorist fighters are now within about 35 to 40 miles of Baghdad. They stormed a police station in Baquba, northeast of Baghdad, stealing all the weapons and engaging Iraqi troops in firefights. In Baghdad, fears are building and security is intensified. The New York Times is reporting that the first flashpoints of major violence in Baghdad since terrorists invaded that country. 4 men shot to death, their bodies left on the street, and the threat of sectarian bloodshed in the capital appearing more imminent now. President Barack Obama has notified Congress that up to 275 troops were sent to support the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Most are already on site beefing up security. And there's now more American firepower on the way. The aircraft carrier George H.W. Bush is in the Persian Gulf, along with another 5 warships. And still developing whether the U.S. will work with Iran to stop the militants' advance on Baghdad. We now know officials from the rival nations talked briefly yesterday. Only CNN has the vast worldwide resources to bring you every angle of this rapidly changing story. Our correspondents, our analysts, and our guests will dig down through the many layers of this complex story. So let's begin now our coverage in Baghdad with CNN's Anderson Cooper. Anderson is on the ground. Anderson, Nouri al-Maliki says he wants to gain back some lost ground from those opposition forces, but some believe that at this point it is a lost cause. What is the view from the ground?
Well, certainly it's a big question about whether or not they can gain back the lost areas. As you reported, the big news this morning, the fact that there is fighting some 35 to 40 miles now outside the city of Baghdad. On your broadcast last night, Don, at 10 o'clock, we were talking about 50 to 55 miles. Now we're talking about 40 miles at the most, the western edges of the city of Baquba. As you said, they took over a police station, stole the weapons, fatalities there, and then withdrew to the western part. Fighting said to be still going on, according to 2 sources in that town. That would be yet another defeat for Iraqi security forces, on top of yesterday's defeat in the northwest in the city of Tal Afar. ISIS forces taking over a city of some 200,000 people in the northwest. So again, real questions remaining about the capabilities of the Iraqi military to stop the advance of ISIS forces and their supporters, Don.
And Anderson, we have been talking about the Iraqi forces outnumbering the opposition 100 to 1, yet still they have issues fighting them off. We talked about a morale problem. What exactly is it? Why are they having issues when they outnumber them 100 to 1?
Well, a lot of observers say morale is certainly an issue, not really clear. They feel perhaps not as much support from the central government. The central government is divided, seems weak. That translates down into the Iraqi forces. They haven't had the kind of battlefield experience that some of these ISIS forces have had over the last several years. That many of them have been fighting on the ground in Syria. Now they have come here to fight. We haven't seen, obviously, the same from the Iraqi security forces. So there's a lot of different factors involved. There are more specialized forces which are now ringing Baghdad. The hope is, at least, that if ISIS forces continue to approach Baghdad, those forces would come into play and that they would be able to resist any kind of an advance. But again, that remains to be seen.
So, Anderson, what are they saying? What are Iraqis saying about American involvement? Are they wondering, where are the Americans now? Do they feel like America is helping them out right now?
Well, there's certainly, Nouri al-Maliki's government has said that they want more help from the United States. They appreciate the efforts the U.S. has made thus far, but they really want more. They want to see clearly some military involvement from the U.S. In terms of drone strikes or air strikes, something to help them, something that will help them on the battlefield, fighting in these cities, fighting in these towns, and in the places in between as these forces advance. This force, ISIS, though it fights like a terrorist force, it also in many ways is fighting like a conventional army. It's got vehicles, it's got equipment now, vehicles that they've stolen, that they've taken, that they've captured from Iraqi forces. So they are a target that can be hit from the air. The question is, will other Western powers get involved?
Anderson Cooper in Baghdad. Anderson, thank you. We'll see you throughout the day and evening here on CNN. Make sure you stay safe there. And this morning, let's talk about options now, because the White House faces tough decisions and not a lot of time. President Barack Obama has met with his national security team to discuss all the options, both military and political, on the diplomatic front. Now, maybe none is more thorny than the possibility of cooperating with Iran to stop the militants' advance. Reza Sayah is in Tehran for it. So, Reza, is Iran as squeamish about a cooperation as Washington is at this point?
They have some concerns, Don, but the door is open, according to Iranian officials. And based on what we've heard from them here in Tehran, and based on what we know has taken place on the sidelines of the Vienna nuclear discussions between Iranian officials and American officials, we're getting a much better idea of what a potential alliance would look like. Both sides have pretty much discounted military cooperation on the ground. In other words, it's very unlikely that we'll see a scenario where you have Iranian fighting forces on the ground in Iraq, and up above you have U.S. drones and U.S. fighter jets. That's unlikely to happen, and that's no surprise for several reasons. First off, it doesn't look like either side, neither the Tehran or Washington, has decided what kind of military action, if any, they're going to deploy in Iraq. And then if they are considering working together, it's going to be complicated. Remember, these are two countries that have been bitter rivals for much of 35 years, no diplomatic relations. There's still a lot of lingering mistrust. If they want to get on the battlefield together, cooperating, that's going to take some time. And also you have to consider Iran's military doctrine. It's been a defensive one in modern history. They've never deployed uniformed forces in another sovereign country. And the president here, Hassan Rouhani, has pretty much dismissed the idea at this point of deploying troops. So the most likely scenario, if anything happens, is Iran providing intelligence to the U.S. government, much like it did back in 2001 when it helped the U.S. beat the Taliban in Afghanistan, Don, but still not clear what kind of alliance, if any, is going to happen if these two countries get together.
Reza Sayah in Tehran. Reza, thank you very much. And as violence intensifies, some Iraqi store owners are seeing a boost in business after Iraq's most senior Shiite cleric called on followers to strike back against radical militants. This is a market in the town of Basra. Traders are selling military uniforms to those who want to join the fight. Market owners say thousands of uniforms and combat boots have already been sold. And the possibility of ISIS terrorists taking over Iraq could have dire consequences. In addition to brutal and ruthless tactics, the group has unlimited access to cash and gold, which makes them a powerful force capable of almost anything. That is why House Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Rogers says acting now is critical.
Imagine a safe haven the size of Indiana. That's what they have right now, meaning they can train and recruit and finance. Some estimates as much as $1 billion in both cash and gold. That means they are well financed to do any operation in the world that they want to do. That is what's so concerning. We have to find a way to disrupt that activity very, very quickly. And this isn't a month-long project or 2 months or 6 months. We need to start that now. And you can also have political reconciliation.
But disrupting activity quickly is going to be quite a challenge. Joining me now is Marine Corps retired Major General Tom Wilkerson. General, good morning to you. Do you agree with Congressman Rogers?
I think you need to put this in perspective. You've heard a lot of experts this morning talking about things, and one of the most famous of broadcast journalists was once heard to say, in times like these, we need to remember there have already been times like these, and that was Paul Harvey. My point is, what's the difference between the end of the Korean War and the end of the war in Vietnam? Very simply, American forces stayed. What's the likelihood here with the end of the war in Vietnam and the end of the war in Iraq? American forces left. We have ceded the initiative to those who remain on the ground. The problem now then is there are no good military options because they're all temporary. What that means is whatever we do, when they're through and the smoke clears, the three forces that are currently engaged will still be there: Shia, Sunni, and Kurd.
Okay. Wait, now listen, as I hear you're saying that do you believe there aren't any real clear good options here?
That's
Is that
right.
what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Because
So
in
not
the
even
end, we're
not
not
even
gonna
boots on the ground.
Well, because boots on the ground have been eliminated by the president. He's indicated we will not have a long-term presence on the ground in sizable forces such as those we have remaining in Korea since the early 1950s. So where we are today is when the smoke clears from the temporary options, whether they're airstrikes or whether they're support, the three fighters are still going to be on the ground, and that's Shia, Sunni, and Kurd. And there's one other thing to keep in mind. This is very important. There's an overriding objective the president has to consider, and that is Americans killed in the action or Americans captured in those actions by forces that are very clearly violent. That is something that's constantly got to be on his mind, as it was on other previous presidents like Jimmy Carter when the embassy was captured. You just can't afford that.
Okay, I don't want to put words in your mouth, and I'm not trying to read your thoughts here. But
you're not, Don.
But what I'm gathering you're saying is that militarily there aren't any options. The United States, the only options that anybody really has, including the United States, is really lies with the government of Iraq and the leader. And that leader appears, the one in charge now, does not want to cooperate with the other side, and so that's the holdup.
Well, the unfortunate thing is Prime Minister Maliki and his administration have a track record of not cooperating with the Sunnis, of not necessarily acknowledging the Kurds, and now he finds himself in desperate straits. And it's probably a stretch to say he's the leader of all of Iraq, because very clearly he is not.
He is not. And that happened. It's interesting that you say that, because I don't know if I should even continue on talking about the options that the U.S. have, because obviously we can put boots on the ground. Obviously we can do airstrikes. There are a number of things that we can do, but it would be all for naught unless there's a change at the top, starting with Nouri al-Maliki. Is that what you're saying?
And a change on the other sides in the willingness to reconcile. And if you put boots on the ground, how long do you leave them? In other words, look at Korea. We fought the war in the 50s. Our presence there is still a powerful military force in cooperation with our allies, the South Koreans. Do we intend to be in Iraq for the next 50 years?
Mm-hmm. So, in a sense, we're fighting a losing battle militarily and putting people in harm's way militarily, because, again, it really lies with Nouri al-Maliki or whoever takes over, and that could happen soon if things continue to go the way they are, whoever takes over after Nouri al-Maliki.
Well, and in a sense, we're also making Vice President Biden almost a prophet, because back when he was a senator, he postulated that the ultimate closure of Iraq would be in three separate states: Kurds, Sunni, and Shia. And now his prophecy is more and more perhaps becoming true. There are no good military options if you are not willing to stay committed for the long term. They're all temporary bandages, and when the smoke clears, what you're going to see is the same three committed entities, the Kurds, the Sunnis, the violent people, and the Shias, still there, still intermingled in the population, and still engaged.
As close, General, as a yes or no answer as you can give me, do you think Kurds, Sunni, Shia, and the violent people, do you think that at any point they can ever work together to have a unified country, or that's out of the realm of possibilities?
If you're from Las Vegas, you might not want to bet on it.
Thank you. Appreciate you, General Tom Wilkerson.
Glad to be with you today.